Hello, everybody. You may be confused. I am not John, and this is not Nick. But what we are two big fans of the PoddiMouths. I'm Bill Taylor, and I have
I'm Mike Osterlink.
Mike here. Mike and I are probably one of the top two fans of the PoddiMouths, and we've interacted over the years they've been on, and we're concerned some time back when their show went dark for a week or two. And it turns out that they were okay. They were on vacation and had work schedules. But Mike and I were conversing, hey, have you heard from John or have you heard from Nick? And then it led into, hey, they need some guest hosts when they're going to be gone. So Mike and I thought that we would do them the favor of getting together and giving them this nice little recording so that they can plug us in as they need to. So Mike, it's great to finally meet you.
Well, it's great to meet you too, Bill.
Yeah, I will say I instantly connected with you on one of their earlier podcasts when they brought you in to talk about Jeeps. So I thought, okay, here's another kindred soul when it came to cars. And while I don't want to turn this necessarily into a cars podcast, I suspect that's probably where it's going to go.
Seems to be where our connections definitely lead to most of the time.
It does. It does. So one of the things that, Mike, they brought you in as their Jeep expert. So let's, if you don't mind, let's start there and refresh everyone's memory as to why those guys thought you might be a Jeep expert.
Sure. So I have been friends with John since probably the early 2000s. And John knows me from my posts on Facebook as the Jeep guy. I was in a Jeep club in Michigan for quite a number of years and have been playing and tinkering with Jeeps. We're actually on our third Jeep right now. We had, a 2011 two-door, a 2013 two-door, and now we're on a 2018 four-door. It's a Rubicon, and we love this one to death. This will probably be, the one that we keep forever and ever. And I was kind of thinking, time-wise, it doesn't quite work out for my son to be driving it when he turns 16, but we'll get him something nice by then. But these Jeep prices are just incredible right now too. We got lucky when we got this one. We got it off of a lease turn-in. It only had like 10,000 miles on it for a 3-year-old Jeep at the time. And it worked out great. And I got it at a great price that it was just unbelievable. And so, yeah, I love the Jeeps. I love what Jeep is doing nowadays between, the 4xe, the eco diesels. It's just amazing what they're doing with the Wranglers. And mostly when I say Jeep, I mean Wranglers. I don't dislike the other Jeep models, but it's definitely one of my favorites is the Wrangler.
So to you, a Jeep, I mean, a real Jeep is the Wrangler, and that's the other stuff is just kind of clinging on the name.
Right. Yeah. The most capable Jeep right now is obviously the Wrangler. And that's, one of the main reasons why we got into the Jeeps was, my wife wanted a convertible that could tow. And hey, that leaves one vehicle on the market. And I like it. Obviously you got the Broncos now, but back then it was just the Jeep. It was the only convertible that could tow a boat. So that's what we got.
The Chrysler 200 convertible couldn't tow that boat?
We had a couple Sebrings that definitely wouldn't have towed a boat. So, my wife's always been into the convertible vehicles, and the Jeep, just fit the market at the time we needed it. So are your Wranglers, have they all been soft tops? Well, a couple have been dual tops. This current one, with our lovely climate in Ohio, which is a lot different than Michigan, this one is just a soft top. I don't have a hard top for it yet. I eventually like to get one, but this is just a soft top right now.
So how is road noise with that?
That's the only complaint I really have. I took this thing on a journey to north central Nebraska. Let's see, it was probably about a year ago now. I went to my grandparents' place to go hunting and decided, it was the best vehicle to take because I could go on all the back roads that were out there and see, get to the different hunting areas and things. And so the Jeep was the best vehicle to take for that, but that was my one chief complaint, which is the road noise. if we had the hard top, and even if I put one of those, what they call them, hothead liners in that hard top, it would definitely reduce the road noise an awful lot. In fact, there's this guy out there. He did a YouTube video on the difference between. He drives a 4xe, and so road noise can really be a concern for the 4xe customers because they don't have any engine noise drowning out the road noise. And he did a decibel comparison between having a hard top and having the soft top on, and it was quite a bit of difference.
Yeah, it's interesting as you get into different drivetrains like that, it changes the dynamics of the car. And as an example, and I think I once worked for General Motors and retired from there, and I spent a good chunk of my time, actually the last 10 years of the life of the Saturn brand at Saturn. And when we brought out the Ion in the early 2000s, it had a CVT transmission, which changed where the engine revs were. So we're still talking about an internal combustion engine, but because of how that engine was operating at a different rev range, it changed all the dynamics around sound deadening in the car. And it was an interesting exercise. So now you bring in electric vehicles that historically are pretty quiet. And now you've got a whole host of issues to play with. But greater minds than mine will figure that out. But it's fun to watch how these things can change over time. And so I was going to make a funny about your Wrangler. So it only had about 10,000 miles after 3 years. So it's just driven by a little old lady off road on Sundays, huh?
Yeah, a little old lady off road on Sundays, right? Yeah, it's funny. It came up as a Kentucky car, and it had some weird options on it. Like mostly the Rubicons that you see will have leather seats and have heated seats and heated steering wheels. They got all the options on these Rubicon Wranglers, but this thing, it came in, it was a soft top only option because it doesn't have the electrical in the back.
Okay.
For the wiper and the squirters for no defroster too. Yeah, exactly. Defroster, the windshield wiper squirter washer thing. So it didn't have an option for that, and then it had the cloth seats in it, which I like. But normal Rubicon orders don't have that. And then, so I got to think this is a special order, but it was probably a lease, or it could have been, I got to look back at the paperwork because it could have been a bot and didn't really, I've seen this a lot lately with Wranglers. They really didn't know what they were getting into. And so it's a quick turn in at that point because they didn't know what they were getting into with the Wrangler.
Let's face it. I mean, those look terrific on paper and on the commercials, and it's a different beast in real life.
Yes, it is. If you're not used to the bumpy rides, and finding every hole there is usually, it's a totally different ride than anyone's ever expecting to get. And my stepdad, I call him my dad, but my stepdad, he found that out when we went hunting this last year, and he accidentally had his seat upright instead of angled a little bit. And so it kind of jarred us back a little bit, taking the rides on the off-road areas up in Nebraska there.
Well, you've just helped me eliminate one vehicle from my list. So no, and I love them. I had an old '89 Wrangler once when I lived in Tennessee. I picked up, it was 10 years old at that time. So it was an '89 Wrangler, and it was, those, the YJs with the square headlights. Nobody thought they were real Jeep because of square headlights, but it was kind of my first fun vehicle. We had young kids, and it was the first time I could afford a fun vehicle. And I did have fun with it. I did all the fun fix-ups on it and sold it for, probably break even a few years later. But I'm at that point, and it's a terrible point where I want to get a new car, and the market being what it is just terrible. See, you bought it right. You got it, 2 years before things started going sideways. And here I am. I'm just like aching for something new, not because I need something, but I'm a car guy. And I normally, since retiring, look for used vehicles, things I can play with, same kind of thing. But you wouldn't dare look at a used car right now. The prices are horribly inflated, and you can buy new if you want to pay MSRP or above in some cases. And it's interesting. I mean, I'm all over the board. I'm like a kid in a candy store looking for something different. we own too many Coopers, so I'm at the opposite end of the scale as far as the least off-road capable. And living in Detroit, we've gone through a fair number of wheels and tires with our wonderful roads up here. So I typically like to have something else to drive in the winter. And I had this old Honda CRV that I fixed up. And the listeners of the show will know that I run a website called VehicleNanny.com. And I chronicled a color change on that one. I went from the wine color that it came in and put a flat tan paint job on it.
Interesting.
It was a safari tan, because I wanted to make it look a little bit tougher. Well, my son ended up moving back to Michigan this summer, and he's like, I'd like that. So he bought it from me and left me without my winter vehicle. So here I am shopping, going into dealers. I'm the retired guy that wastes their time on test drives and whatnot. But, there are some dealers that are charging $5,000 over for a Subaru Outback, or a Land Rover dealer just charging MSRP on Defender. So, it gets into, and I told these guys, having come from that world, I said, your customers are going to remember this. When this smoke clears, they're going to remember that you tried to get $5,000, or if it's a Bronco, it could be $20,000 over.
Yeah, that just it sickens me. And I've actually been through this about 4 months ago. My daughter was turning 16 and I needed to find a vehicle for her. And I spent probably a whole 5 months researching and looking for a deal and researching more and looking for a great deal. It took me quite a while. And, I'd even resorted to looking at vehicles that had when they're totaled, what's that called? A
rebuilt title.
A rebuilt title, yes. I even went to look at vehicles that had rebuilt titles because the market here was just so crazy. In fact, I'll talk about that. So the first thing, I didn't know much about rebuilt titles, and I went and first thing I did is I called my insurance company.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I need to know, if this is going to affect my insurance. First of all, can I insure it? And second of all, how much more are you going to charge me because it is a rebuilt title? And I got lucky. I won't plug the insurance company's name here, but I got lucky. They said it doesn't matter to them. They don't care if it's rebuilt. They don't care anything about that. They'll just charge you the flat normal rate for that vehicle. Okay. I'm like, that's awesome. So I'm like, okay, that's what we're going to do. So then I'm looking for a while. And actually I ended up with a 2003, no, sorry, not 2003. It's a 2009 Saab 9.3.
Ooh.
So it's a decent vehicle. I had to research it because, it's got that 2.0 T on it. As the engine, and I had to make sure that first of all, the insurance rates were going to climb because of that, because it is a sportier kind of sedan, and making sure that for a 16-year-old, am I going to be okay? So I ended up looking it up. The only thing that concerned me was the parts availability for other things on the vehicle, which being that Saab is no longer, first of all, and second of all, it was a Scandinavian car that General Motors really didn't totally take on all the parts for.
Right.
So so I had a few concerns, but I liked the price. I liked the vehicle. I liked the mileage it had. I liked the gas mileage it's getting. So that's when we ended up pulling the trigger on getting that Saab as a third vehicle, which we've never been a third vehicle family anyway, until my daughter turned 16. So.
Well, I highly endorse the third vehicle concept.
Yes, exactly. I think when the Jeep eventually is, paid off and everything, I think we'll still be a third vehicle family then. So,
yeah, it's, I don't know, it kind of gets in your blood sometimes. And my dream and goal is to have a vehicle for all seasons and all reasons, so it means you have to have something sporty, something all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, throw a pickup or some vehicle that you can haul things in. And you're pretty well set.
Right, exactly. And we've had lots of different types of vehicles. I will say my favorite, obviously, the Jeep Wrangler. My wife's favorite is a convertible Camaro.
Interesting.
She's owned one before this, and she ended up getting out of it because it was a lease at the time, and so we ended up turning it in. I offered her a few times for us just to buy it out. She's like, no, I'll get one later. I'll get one later. And then obviously now we've seen what General Motors is planning on doing with the Camaro.
Yeah.
So we have a couple options here. Now, the main thing that she's looking for the next vehicle is she really, really wants that 50th anniversary Hot Wheels Camaro, the
Yeah.
orange one with the black stripes, but she wants it in a convertible as well. So very rare vehicle. I've been looking and shopping, kind of seeing what the prices are gonna be for something like that, and it's not great pricing, obviously, especially right now,
No.
as we talked about. So, but that is the next dream vehicle, and probably the next vehicle that we will buy as a family is probably a Chevy Camaro, but it's got to be that Hot Wheels edition. So,
Oh my, yeah, I remember those. Those were pretty nice. And I'm a Camaro guy from way back when,
yep.
and so that's always held a nice soft spot in my heart. But as I get older, I start looking at the practicality of things. It's like, oh, not much of a back seat. But then I've got this two-door Mini Cooper that has almost no back seat. Nobody would dare sit behind me.
Yes.
But what if, I love fun cars like that, and I think that that's what keeps things alive. And oh man, what a great time, from the quality and the performance of all vehicles right now. I mean, you look across manufacturers and there's pretty good parity when it comes to, you pretty much can't go wrong with any vehicle that you buy. Well, that's a broad statement, but generally it isn't like in 1988 when you wouldn't dare buy a Kia.
Right.
Those were
Yes.
disposable back then. Now Kia and Hyundai are typically at the top of all the charts when it came to quality and reliability. So how things change, and I think it's a fun time to be a car person, unless you have to go buy one now.
Right, exactly. Unless you have to go buy one. Look what Kia's done with their new sedan, the K5.
Yeah.
The looks and aesthetics of these vehicles are just, it's like, it's a head turner. Every time I go buy one now, it's like, wow, is that one of the new Kias? And it's like, the things that they've done with these is just amazing. And I don't know if it's just because they've Americanized their companies more, or what that actually is behind their drivers for these, but it's definitely been a game changer for them. For sure.
Well,
And the fact that the quality that they're finally putting in these vehicles too. You're right. They used to be disposable cars. You can look at the used car market and see that they were disposable cars, for the prices that they want to sell them at now. But the new ones, I don't know, it's been probably 4 or 5 years now. Kia's really turned around quite a bit. Hyundai right along with them though.
Sure, they're taking this seriously, as they've proven to do that, and they're great students of the business, and they've hired, as I've heard, some really talented engineers from BMW and designers from other European brands, and that's what you're seeing in the products and in the interiors. The interiors are crazy good and stylish and great colors. I'm a color guy. I really like expressive colors both on the inside and the outside, and this is my big challenge, is if I came across the right vehicle that had this terrific color on the outside in an interior that isn't black, I'm in.
Yep.
I'm in. So
that's what amazed me about the Jeep brand, how they're starting to stylize all their different interiors now. Jeep didn't care about interiors back then.
No.
And now, it's amazing because the 4xe get a blue interior, the Rubicons get a red interior, and everything else kind of gets this grayish, more plain. But there's options now. There's options to put different kinds of things everywhere on a Jeep, as you know. But
right.
But even coming from the factory, the blue and the reds was totally different than what they've ever done before, and the badging colors too. They're changing up their trail rated badges to be blue when it's the 4xe and reds for the Rubicons. So it's just, the tow hooks in the front too. That was the part that kind of amazed me about the 4xe with the blue tow hook.
Yeah.
You never see that.
See, you being that Jeep guy, you are noticing these things, and I think that's cool. But so we got kind of deep into this recording without really talking about how we what's our mutual connection? How do we know Nick and John? We haven't
Sure.
talked about that history, and I'm sure the Potty Mouse viewers are wondering, where are we connected or how are we connected? So you mentioned that you had worked with John.
So yes, I had worked with John probably since the early 2000s. John was a video trainer at General Motors,
Yep.
and I was what was labeled as a one-touch technician at General Motors. And so he was the on-air talent, and I was, kind of the behind-the-scenes recording the data and doing database management, things like that.
Okay.
So, in the nature of my job was I had to kind of watch the broadcast to make sure that the responses were coming in from the technicians out in the field. And so I feel like I spent a lot of time with John, even though we didn't spend time together.
Okay.
But John and I became quick friends, as well, because we'd interact when he wasn't in studio and things like that. And John's just one of those personable types of people anyway.
Oh, yeah.
He'll talk to anyone. But so John and I met through General Motors Connection. We kind of kept in touch over the years since we both left those positions. And then I started listening to the podcast. I think they were in episode 3 when I started listening to their podcast on the regular. And so, like you said earlier, we just want to make sure that we're invested in this podcast now. We're invested personally in the guys and how well the podcast does, and we just want to keep seeing it going with John and Nick at the helm here. So then, obviously, John invited me on to talk about Jeeps because they wanted to do a Jeep episode, and that's how I met Nick, and Nick and I became good friends as well. So
cool. Yeah, much like you, my connection with that duo came through John, and John had that neat reputation in the GM training world as first of all, very knowledgeable in the topics that they wanted him to cover, but his delivery was pretty outstanding as well. And so that was kind of in the background as I was moving my way through different aspects of General Motors. And then my last stint was in helping dealers with their digital marketing adoption. So we had many digital marketing strategies that we were hoping the dealers would adopt. And so we were doing these training tours. We called them e-summits at the time. And where we'd go to 15 to 20 cities, bring in a crowd of 100 to 200 dealer personnel to do some training. And John was a perennial favorite to bring out there because, first of all, he's bigger than life on a stage. His jokes are clean and they're funny. And he just does a great job. And so I wasn't in that group more than probably 6 months. And I attended my first e-summit as the manager of that activity. And everyone's talking about this John Quaddy and, John's, he's funny and everything else. And, I have a dry sense of humor and I think I'm funny, but I thought, okay, here's competition, right?
yeah.
Well, we all had dinner and it was like within 3 minutes, John and I were best of friends and he knows how to interact, but we've had a lot of fun over the years. And much like you, I learned that he had this podcast and I had just retired and I got into walking, every day and I needed something to listen to. So I thought I'd give it a shot. And sure enough, I enjoyed it because there's topics that obviously you and I can relate to as these guys are talking. And you'll hear them on certain podcasts. They'll talk about Bill's walking, so we can't have him look at something and blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
But
the only person not watching the video is Bill. Hopefully not watching the video.
Right. So I just found it really engaging. And I used to call them afterwards and say, guys, I was laughing so hard while I'm walking and I wanted to jump into your conversation. And I think that that's probably the best indicator that they were onto something. And, clearly there are two different frames of mind that come together. And I instantly took a liking to Nick. And obviously we've all had a chance to talk with both of them. I haven't had a chance to meet them like I know you've met Nick, but they're two great guys. I think they have big hearts. I love their diverse topics that they cover. I'm hoping that their viewers and listeners also have that same appreciation because they do a great job in my eyes, and they should be growing this thing.
That's right. Yes, I totally agree with that. We just want to help them grow it. Kind of be that passenger along the ride here of helping them get through this and grow this podcast into what we view it could be. At this point, and just a great bunch of guys. You're right about the diversity of the topics. I know we just got done talking for 20 minutes about cars, but
Yeah.
John and Nick, the way that they can take these topics and spin them, and it's amazing to me, and it's always topical. It's always, something that I'm probably thinking about or was thinking about recently,
Right.
and things that just going on in the world today that need to be talked about, and things that they just do a great job with that. And we're really, like I said, just trying to be passengers along with this ride and help them out as much as we can.
Right. No, that's very true. I'm gonna queue up one other topic, and your video froze, so I'm wondering if you can
Yeah, let me refresh that again.
click on and off or refresh that. So, um, it's interesting. They talk about rabbit holes, and by the way, you're back on
Good.
video. And we've stayed in one hole today with the car talk, but that's what brought us together, and that's what this is all about. There was one topic, and it wasn't that long ago, depending on when they dropped this in, but John was talking about Amazon Prime, and he dumped Amazon Prime, and he had his reasons for doing that. But it's something we've probably all thought about doing, and I'm sure that whoever heard that topic was thinking, yeah, and then they're probably waiting, what did you do next? And I don't think he ever got into that, but it's interesting. We've all kind of fallen victim or kind of got to a comfortable place with ordering things on Amazon. At least I did, because like, oh, I needed some detailing brushes, I'll just go to Amazon, and it was great because you either got it within 2 days, sometimes the next day, and in a weird situation, maybe the same day. But with transportation of goods right now being so tough, it's really hard to come up with a good source, and they're not as reliable because they've had to, count on certain shippers. And I know that they've got their own kind of last mile services out there, but it's getting harder and harder to get really good, reliable deliveries. And so I've taken to shopping more local. And I think maybe
I
that's
agree
where,
with that.
yeah, I think
Yes.
that's where John was going with some of that. And I know Nick's a big believer in that. So it's interesting, but I'd be curious. And whenever this plays, I'd be curious where people are going to buy their goods, because we still like to buy a lot of things online. And I've dabbled with Walmart.com or Chewy to get the pet supplies, and they've worked out pretty well. And in stores like Walmart, you can range where you can go pick it up at the store, and
Hmm.
that's become pretty popular with a lot of that. But it's interesting. I find myself going to Best Buy a little bit more often than I used to just go online and I need a new headset or something. And it's amazing how the course of events over the last year or so have changed, at least my habits. And I think John was making the change for different reasons, but it does spark a conversation. And that's the beauty of those two coming together, is that now they've got me thinking about, beyond just this convenience that we once had, and taking a look at different things differently. So I think that's where you were going as well. But I
Yeah.
think it's fun to watch those kinds of topics come alive.
Yes, it's definitely interesting. And like I will say, like Amazon, the difference between Amazon when I lived in Michigan and Amazon here in Central Ohio, it's like night and day, because you were talking about how Amazon will bring in things and they're kind of the last mile delivery solution for Michigan, and I found that totally be the fact up there. They just didn't have the warehouses to hold things up there, and I know they're getting better. They're buying more warehousing space up there, but down here in Central Ohio, we've got like I don't even can't even count, probably 15 Amazon warehouses within 100 miles of where I'm at, and so everything comes straight from them to our doorstep.
Yeah,
It's they're not just the last minute, last mile shipment here. No, they physically they get them from one warehouse into the other warehouse, and they ship it directly to my house.
yeah,
And I know John has his reasons for getting out of Amazon, but it's seriously it's the convenience stuff that I really, and my family is really attached to Amazon. But you're right, things have changed within the last couple of years, and I do find myself, I support a lot of local businesses now. It was something
yeah.
I did it a little bit in Michigan, but I don't know if we just got stuck in our ways in Michigan or what that was. But here in Ohio, we're trying to do local things. Like I won't drive to a different Kroger that's outside of my area just because I know that the local Kroger, it's local money, it stays here. Kroger
Right.
sees that money stays here, and that's the kind of thing that I want to kind of promote with that. And then the local shops. We've only been here for a couple of years, so we're just getting used to where those local shops are for things like that,
Right.
and getting used to shopping locally. And honestly, another thing that we're doing shopping more locally is the Facebook Marketplace. I'll go on there and
Talk
we'll look
about a
for
rabbit hole.
something. Right, exactly. We'll go on there, we'll look for something, and then we know we're buying it from someone local instead of getting it from one of the big guys that's selling it out somewhere else. And hopefully that eventually equates out in the end. I've sold lots of stuff on the Facebook Marketplace, and it seems to work out okay. I've only had a couple bad experiences, but
Well, I
everything
think,
else seems to work out well.
yeah, the strength of Marketplace is, you have the Facebook profile that you could lurk on a little bit, and you can get a sense of, was this a recently added profile or they've been
Right.
established? And like this pedal car that's on the wall here, which I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, why is it on the wall? But it's art. But I picked that up a couple years ago off Facebook Marketplace from a gentleman quite a bit older than me who rode that when he was a little kid. And it was not in that shape when I got it. And I put off the restoration until about a month ago. So it'd been sitting in my basement workshop for that long. And I finally did it because I thought I needed some wall art in case I do a video like this. But there was a situation where I bought local, if you will, but there was a story behind it. And I love that. And I think that that's what a marketplace like Facebook Marketplace does bring to the party. And, plus you're kind of recycling or reusing things. And so there's, keeping the landfills a little bit cleaner, if you will. But there's some great deals. But yeah, I think that it's a great thing to check out first. Now there's some, shady characters that have appeared on there. And I think they left Craigslist and came to Marketplace.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
That's for
but
sure.
it's all good stuff. And, and I've used it, I think about a year ago before COVID, the year before, I was pulling stuff out of my attic. And as I was pulling it out, I would take pictures of it, list it, set it aside.
Yep.
And as I'm getting the next thing out, I'm getting pinged because somebody wanted to buy that, whatever it was. And
Right.
it was great. I made $1,000 in 2 days just doing that.
Just cleaning out your attic. Yep.
I loved it. It was like, this is awesome. I started coming into the house and my wife said, hey, why don't you slow down this Marketplace thing? We might need some furniture.
Yeah. And my parents moved from Michigan to a temporary home in Minnesota this past 2 weeks ago. And they were selling a lot of their furniture on Marketplace because they knew they were going into storage, for a little while and stuff until their new house is built. And so they were going into they sold a lot of their stuff on the Marketplace before they actually moved out to Minnesota, which was kind of interesting too. Some of it didn't sell, some of it did, but and I got on my mom a little bit because every time she'd take a picture of the couch, the dog would be on the couch. And I'm like, you got to take your dog off the couch, Mom.
You've just eliminated half of the potential buyers who have dog allergies. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I'm like, the dog's not for sale either, so you need to take the dog off the couch.
Now, sometimes that adds a little bit of, interest to the ad, and you
Right.
get that banter. Hey, does the dog come with it? But more times than not, somebody goes, "Oh, I've got a dog allergy, so I can't, even consider
Right,
that." But
exactly. Yep.
thanks.
Right. Well, it's also, the part of that being honest when you're selling things too. It is coming from a home that the dogs were allowed on the couch. So
Yeah.
I guess she was coming from that point as well too, with the ways that she was posting those pictures. So, but yeah, it ended up working out pretty well for them too.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, one last thing I want to mention, because we were talking about this before the recording, and you, as you were talking about the different Wranglers and the 4xe, electrification of some of these vehicles. Obviously, that's coming. There's a lot of discussion about it now, whether that sticks or not. But for the guys that like the old classics, we're starting to see some electrification of these, and I think Nick brought up recently he saw a Porsche that had electric. I think it was a Tesla motor and battery pack put in it. And I think what he didn't know is just how big this is becoming.
Yeah.
And
This is a big subject right now because a lot of these people want to restore these vehicles, but
Yeah.
they want the new interiors. You know, they want the a fancy dash coming off of it when it is this fully restoration type thing, and they don't want to deal with a combustion engine that's got a carburetor on it,
Yeah.
you know, and doesn't have, you know, yeah, there's a lot of that going on right now, between these converting these classics, these beautiful classics, is what we're seeing a lot of, and putting the electrified components in it, and it's, you know, where do you put, you know, first of all, what type of electrical components are you putting in? Are you putting in the ones that are straight to the wheels, or are you putting in one, you know, that works different, you know, almost like a 4xe, you know, in a hybrid kind of model? You know, what kind of electrification are you doing to these vehicles? And also, what's that doing to the price tag of these vehicles? These are classic cars to begin with. They're very hard to evaluate what the prices are. But then when you electrify one, and talk about, you know, the thousands of dollars you spend on parts, and
Yeah.
now how much is it really worth?
Well, I think at that point, you know, anyone who's doing that isn't looking for the return on investment, clearly. I
Yeah,
mean,
I hope not.
even your standard restoration, you're not going to get back. You know, if you're
Right.
going to buy you know, if you want a restored car, you're better off buying one that's been restored, because the guy that did the work spent way more money than what he got out of it. But I do know, and I'm a big fan of resto mods, where you retain the styling of the vehicle, but you put some modern, whether it's suspension components, a modern drivetrain. And there is a pretty big move afoot to electrify some of these cars. And you see Beetles with these, you know, much like that Porsche that Nick was talking about. You know, they have a, you know, electric motor in the rear, and the performance they're getting out of these cars is incredible, because we all know electric vehicles, you know, torque on demand, basically. General Motors did this, and they're starting to sell, much like they would sell a crate engine in their performance division. They're selling a e-crate motor, if you will, and recently showed one off at SEMA. It was a K5 Blazer. I think it was a 77 or 78, where they put in this electric motor. I think it came from the Bolt, if I'm not mistaken, but battery pack that was a little bit bigger than that, and they spread it out across the load floor of this Blazer. But supposedly this thing just hauls like you would believe. Now, that's going to hurt some people's sensibilities, but I think now you've got something highly reliable. You talked about carburetors.
Yep.
You've got the original style of the vehicle, but you've enhanced the performance of it too. I'm intrigued. I wouldn't pay for that, mind you, but I'm really intrigued about that. I love the imagination that goes into these kinds of resto mods or future think, because I love the look of these older vehicles. You know, especially if it's, you know, typically, you know, it's the cars from your high school years or early college years that stick in your mind.
Yep.
And those are the vehicles that, you know, we all would consider a classic. So for me, it'd be something from the 70s. Maybe for you, it's in the, I don't know, 2000s or so. I don't,
Late 90s.
yeah. So I think that's, you know, that's the way it is, but people are working around, you know, what are our limitations, but where can we go with these things? But yeah, you're right. They're not cheap. They are
No,
not cheap.
I don't know what General Motors' price tag is on that type of setup either.
Yeah.
You know, it just looking at it, like the Tesla ones, you know, the cost that they pass off to the customer on their extended range vehicles. You know, looking at those types of things, and how I know they're selling their batteries and components to other people, other car manufacturers as well now. But even when they do sell them off like that, I don't think they're giving them full capability, like as if you bought a Tesla, because I read some reports about electric vehicle ranges, you know, because that's my biggest thing is, you know,
Yeah.
If I'm ever going to get into the electric vehicle market, I need a good range.
Yeah.
You know, I want to be able to go from here in central Ohio all the way up to Michigan to visit family, you know, and I want to be able to do that on the one charge. You know, I don't want to have to stop over, you know, somewhere in Findlay, Ohio, or Toledo, Ohio, to stop off and charge for an hour or so. You know, I want to be able to complete that journey all in that one charge and get there. So, but if they could do that on a classic car, wouldn't that be amazing? Like, you get that kind of range on an electrified classic vehicle? That'd be something else.
And I'm not sure you need the range on something like that because
That's true.
you're driving them to car shows and back, or
Yep.
you're going out for, it might be the ideal situation. And look, if you've owned any of these, and certainly I have owned a number of vehicles from the 70s, and um, they're not efficient. I mean, you can smell what they're putting out. So it's probably not great for the environment, although it's great for the memory.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's pretty bad. I've met some other guys through listening to their podcast. There's two young guys, probably in their mid 30s down in Texas, that have a podcast, GT Garage Talk. So I'll give them a little plug there. And one of them quit his day job and became an automotive writer as a result of their successes, and just chronicled a trip in a Mustang Mach E from East Texas to Oklahoma. He took his family with him, and you could hear the tension in the video of him trying to find a working charging station. And he'd
In
pull up to
Texas.
one, they had it all mapped out, and all of a sudden, only 2 of the 8 chargers are working, and you've got somebody plugged in, eating, lunch across the street. It became a challenge, and he said his normal 7-hour trip took him 14 hours.
Oh no.
He was, and he did it for the story.
Yep.
But unfortunately, his family didn't appreciate the story. So
I know that would be the first thing. My daughter and my wife do not appreciate vehicles as much as I do, and my son the same too. He's a little bit more tolerant to it, but my wife and my daughter do not appreciate vehicle rides as much as I do, and so I can only imagine what he was going through. Because if a 7-hour trip took them 14 hours, they'd be about my throat pretty much the whole rest of the 7 hours extra it took.
Exactly. So I think there's a lot of work to be done there. There obviously some infrastructure work that needs to be done, but it will likely come, just as we've evolved from the horse and buggy back in the early 1900s to where we are today.
Just
it's,
amazing.
necessity is the mother of invention, and I think there's so much attention placed on this. There's a balance in there somewhere, Mike, and I'm not sure it's 100% one way or the other. But I think if we can take advantage of whatever propulsion systems are out there that meets that need, and I think, the classic cars or commercial delivery vehicles that have a set number of miles they drive per day and can return to a warehouse that can plug in, that's the ideal situation.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's another thing. I was reading recently is Tesla's supposed to be coming out with the new the lower priced compact electric vehicle, and these
Right.
report writers were writing Tesla because they said that they were coming out with the truck. They said they're coming out with the Roadster. They said they were coming out with the semi truck. All this stuff that they haven't delivered on. But you look at it, I understand why Tesla hasn't delivered on those niche vehicles.
Right.
They probably wouldn't sell a whole lot of. But it is, these are things that to look forward to that are coming.
Yeah.
Look at the new contract USPS signed for electric vehicles and things like that too. These are things that are coming and will eventually come, and it's exciting to me. I know it's not as exciting to other people out there for this kind of stuff, but this is very exciting to me to see how things are changing with the automotive, industry and everything, because it is very near and dear to my heart still as well.
Yeah, it's time will tell, and I think that we'll see what the adoption is of these vehicles. I think there's a lot of interest around it. I think that first of all, I think today's internal combustion engines are highly efficient. I think they do a great job with the small sizes that you're seeing in these things. Who would have thought of putting a 4-cylinder engine in a big pickup? I mean, it's crazy. Or look at the new Bronco. That the base engine is that, and they say it's quite adequate.
Yeah,
I
I
drove
just,
a Land Rover Defender last week that had the 2-liter in it, and it was really, really pretty quick. It had 8-speed transmission, and it was almost 300 horsepower, and it was a nice vehicle. So you can do it. It can be done.
Yeah. I mentioned I took that trip from moving my parents from Michigan to Minnesota, and I drove my dad's Silverado. He has an eco diesel Silverado. I think it's a 2020 model, and it still only got 32,000 miles on it. and him and I like to play this game, or a gas mileage game. And it's definitely been a competition, the last few years about, who can have more gas efficient vehicles,
Okay.
and still fun to drive. So
And you did that with your Wrangler?
yeah, I've done it with my Wrangler before. So
Okay.
when I took my Wrangler up north up north Michigan, I was going with a few friends, and so when I was going with a few friends, I was sandwiched in between some RVs with them towing their Jeeps. So imagine, an RV in front towing a Jeep on a trailer, and then me in my Jeep, and then another RV behind me. So I'm in between all these, taking their drafts. So in my Wrangler, I got that thing up to 29 miles to the gallon going up north. And for a Wrangler, that is awesome numbers, especially that, was it the 3.6 gasoline engine that was in those Wranglers? That was unheard of to get that kind of gas mileage. So that was awesome. And then, so what I did with my my dad's truck, he's got that Silverado, and I was drafting behind him in a U-Haul. So he had this U-Haul going, and he had a trailer on the back of that U-Haul. And so I was kind of drafting in between there. I was trying to set the right draft area, because he's got, in the Silverado, they've got the constant rate now, what's your gas mileage rate now kind of thing.
Right.
So I would pick my positions behind the U-Haul to try and get the best possible gas mileage. And so he had initially set like a 31 miles to the gallon on that Silverado. And so my goal was to beat that. I had to get better than 31 miles to the gallon. So I eventually got there. I took a picture of it real quick because we were driving, and the next gas station we stopped at, I said, "Hey, look what I did." And he had like 31.6, and I got it up to 31.7. I'm like, "Look, I beat your score." He's like, "No way." I'm like, "Yes, I sure did." He's like, "That is awesome." I'm like, "I can't find a place to put in my initials though for high score." And he's like, "Ha ha ha." So eventually we ended up in Minnesota. It was like a 600-mile trip, I think. And I ended up getting 37.2 miles to the gallon was the highest I got it to. Oh, and that was over a 400-mile range too. So you have these different settings you can set. Like you want to see your gas mileage for the last 100, 200, or 400. He had it set to the highest, and that's what I got. And he's like, "I'm never going to be able to beat that. I have to trade in the truck now."
That's awesome.
I said, "Yep, you'll never be able to beat it. That's for sure." But yeah.
Hey, Mike, go ahead and refresh your video while I tell my story.
Okay.
So my little Mini Cooper is a little bit more fuel efficient than those vehicles, but I was on a recent trip. It was about like a 2-hour trip, and I'm not known for keeping it close to the speed limit in that vehicle. So don't always get the most you could get out of it, but I was doing the same thing. Like, okay, I've got time to spare. I kept this, it was still above 70, but not by much. And I was creeping up. My average fuel economy was 39.6. And that's not normally where this is rated at. And I'm like, I gotta get this to 40, right?
Yeah.
And I resisted resetting, the computer for that site.
Yep.
I wanted this to be legitimate. So I
Uh-huh.
just played around, backed it down. And by the time I got to my destination, it was at 40 exactly. And I think I took a picture of it and probably posted it on Facebook because I was so proud. But, it took a lot for me to get at that point. But I'm like, hey, this is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
This is pretty cool.
And that's what I've noticed too, is a lot of these companies, I think it was a Prius that I had probably rented or driven for someone or something. And I noticed, like, it was when I was in California, they gave me a Prius as a rental car.
Okay.
As I was exiting the vehicle, I noticed it like kind of gamified the whole experience, saying, "Hey, this trip, this is what you did for gas mileage for this trip, and this is your max speed," and all this different information. I'm like, they're really gamifying this whole gas mileage thing. I'm like, that's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah. And I think guys like you and I would probably be inspired by that and probably look for that high score like you're talking about. But my wife, who appreciates cars but is not the aficionado, would just say, where do I put the gas?
Right.
Or, how do I make sure that I can get where I'm going? And she does it in a nice, safe manner. So
Yep.
sorry, dear, but it's not important to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to bridge that. But we spent a lot of time talking cars because clearly that's our mutual love, and I think a lot of people probably feel that way. But we definitely have passion around that, and that's something I really respect in somebody. And I think that's probably why I took an instant liking to you, Mike. So I appreciate
Sure.
that.
I know it's exact same way with you, Bill. I mean, because yeah, there's not many people you could sit down and talk with cars for about, for an hour, especially over a Zoom call. Most guys want
Exactly.
to be in person, and and I also feel, like we said earlier, we're supporting our friends here.
Yes.
And, this is obviously just one topic we can talk about, but it's been great getting to know you over cars, Bill. And honestly,
Thank you.
this has been
Well,
excellent.
yeah, and I hope that our good friends John and Nick appreciate that we're trying to fill a void that they may leave from time to time by doing this. And if they ever invite us to do this legitimately, we may even veer off the topic of cars more than
That's
we
right.
did. But that's okay. This is the diversity of life, and some of us are good at one thing and better at the other. But I think we should probably wrap this up because
Okay.
I know the boys like to keep it under an hour. But again, it was great getting to know you better, and I certainly hope that we get a chance to do this again. And I don't know who gets to do the John sign off. You want to do it?
No, I'll let you do it this time.
All right. So, John, in respect to you and honor to you, I'll just say, see ya.
See ya.